to improve type 2 diabetes and signs of, and also potentially as weight loss. And this is a pathway for vitamin D synthesis. I just wanted to include this because we know that we get most of our vitamin D through sun exposure. So I'm going to summarise a lot of work here in just one slide. And we know that vitamin D deficiency is associated with obesity, so those people who are obese have reduced circulating levels of vitamin D. But we don't really understand this link, and it's a fat-soluble hormone, so it doesn't get sequestered away into fat. And there are a lot of other sort of hypotheses around this. There's also an inconsistent effect of vitamin D supplementation in clinical trials, particularly for weight gain. Many of these studies have been quite small in size, and often when they put people into these studies, they're not actually necessarily vitamin D deficient to start off with, so it's hard to necessarily see the effect of vitamin D supplementation. So we were interested in looking at effects of vitamin D, and I'll go into that in a bit later. But we also had a look in the literature about the potential for phototherapy, so sun therapy, to modulate disease. And this is some studies from our collaborators in the UK. And what they found is when they gave a suberythemus or non-burning dose of ultraviolet A radiation, they found reduced blood pressure in a group of medical student volunteers. And they can see here that there's a reduction in arterial blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure, so an improvement in their heart health. And these findings were linked with nitric oxide. So you probably don't realise that there's actually significant stores of nitric oxide in your skin, and this mediator is really important for improving our blood pressure. And we think that sunlight and UV radiation can result in exporting of nitric oxide healthy metabolites into blood to have an important suppressing effect on blood pressure. So these studies suggested that there was reduced hypertension with this phototherapy, but you might have noticed it was only for about 20 minutes, so it was of a short duration, and it was in a healthy young man. So what about these other at-risk populations? And these trials are certainly in their infancy. So just to summarise the literature, we find that there is evidence for beneficial effects of increased sun exposure, but we know that obesity is associated with this sedentary and indoor lifestyle. And so is it actually people getting less physical activity? It's hard to know from some of these studies of people performed to date. And we do see some clinical benefits for people in these hypertension studies, but I think certainly more work needs to be done in that area. So you can't see this very well, but leads me to show you some of the results from our studies where we've been examining the effects of sun exposure on the development of obesity and type 2 diabetes through in vivo modelling. So this is our experimental setup, and we shave the backs of our mice. You can see a nice mouse all shaved right there, and then we put them under the UV lamps for just 2 to 3 minutes, and this gives them a little dose of ultraviolet radiation. She also said we also mock treat control animals, so they go through the same procedure, but they don't get the UV radiation. So this is the experiment that we've been doing, and we've been interested in comparing the effects of vitamin D and ultraviolet radiation. And what we did to start off with is we fed our mice a vitamin D containing or absent diet, and then we put them on a high-fat diet as well to make them overweight and obese, and to induce signs of type 2 diabetes. So we also had groups of mice who received UV exposure as well, and this was a low dose, non-burning dose. We did this twice a week throughout the 12 weeks of high-fat diet feeding. I'm going to show you 2 results from these studies where we've looked at the glucose challenge of these mice, and then I can show you some of the weight gain results. So this is the results of the weight gain over 12 weeks. And first of all, you can see here, this is the effects of vitamin D. You can see that's the black line there, and there was no effect of vitamin D supplementation. But the red line is the effects of UV, and we saw about a 30% reduction in weight gain relative to the low-fat diet control. So that was a nice result. And then when we had a look at their fat levels around their waist, we found, again, UV significantly suppressed those levels as well. So remember, this is a low-dose exposure, twice a week of only a few minutes. equivalent probably in Perth. We then did a glucose challenge, so we fasted our mice and then we gave them an injection of glucose, very similar to what you would do as a part of an oral glucose tolerance test, except it's an injection. And then we monitored their glucose over time, of course. So at the top is the high-fat diet, so you see a significant increase in the glucose and it's sustained for a while. It takes longer for it to be cleared. So in our mice we found that the vitamin D had no effect, and we saw a very nice effect of the low dose UV on reducing these glucose levels. So UV suppressed weight gain and signs of type 2 diabetes, a lot of other signs as well that I won't go into today, and this was independent of vitamin D. And it's important to note this low dose UV was effective, and this is important for potentially translating this in future studies. So how does this happen? And this is really where help from the Diabetes Foundation comes about. So I talked a bit about nitric oxide, and we're interested in having a look at the potential for nitric oxide to exert its effects in our studies. And so we know that exposure to skin with ultraviolet radiation releases nitric oxide. So this has been done in these medical students, and we wanted to do this in our mice as well. So this is a little figure showing that when we paint a chemical on the skin of the mice, it fluoresces after UV exposure and also after the painting onto the skin of a nitric oxide donor. So indeed, UV can result in release of nitric oxide in the skin of mice. And the other thing we're interested in is the potential for brown fat to be activated by UV exposure. So some of you may or may not know about brown fat. We have several types of fat in our body, and this is where it's located in people. So we've got babies, and traditionally it's been thought that babies have this non-shivering heat production, and it's what brown fat does to keep them warm. But over the last 10 years, we've actually found deposits of brown fat in human adults. So you can see some very nice levels of brown fat occurring just under sort of the shoulder and neck regions, and these are regions that we get exposed to sun. So the hypothesis is that this gets activated by sun exposure. In the mice, we also have a nice deposit in this sort of upper neck region, and this area actually lies beneath the skin that we expose to UV. So I've said that brown fat is involved in heat production, but it can also regulate glucose and insulin responses, and other studies have shown that nitric oxide can activate these processes. So what the funding has enabled us to do is to import this mouse. It's called the thermo mouse, it's a typical mouse. And what this mouse does is that when the brown tissue is activated, it produces a bioluminescent reporter. So you can see over here, these aren't our studies, but you can see that when you put the mice in the cold, you see a very nice induction or activation of the brown adipose tissue. So we've done some preliminary investigations and found that actually UV exposure increases this sort of heat production in the brown adipose tissue. So we've done a time box. So these are our mice in a special biome in our animal facility. We see that after 24 hours, we see a nice increase in this activation of brown adipose tissue, and we quantify this over time in a number of animals. So what's happening now? So we're examining the role of UV-induced nitric oxide. So we've got these mice, got them on the high-fat diets, and we're looking serially at heat production in this tissue through this special bioluminescence. And we've got some experiments which we've just literally completed in the last few days. And what we're doing is high-fat feeding for 12 weeks, giving our mice the UV, and this time we're also giving them this special nitric oxide scavenger, which we can then potentially take away the effects of nitric oxide and show whether or not the effects of UV are dependent on this mediator. So we're using our low dose of UV and looking at these outcomes, which I've already talked to you about after published studies, but also looking at this heat production successively. So hopefully this will help us develop new ways of activating brown fat and also get a better understanding of the potential for sun exposure. I haven't talked about it much today, but obviously Australia has a big cancer problem, and so it's all really about getting the right balance, getting your vitamin D as well. But I've shown today there are some other beneficial effects of sun exposure potentially for type 2 diabetes control. And finally, it brings me to the end of my talk, so I'd like to acknowledge the other researchers who are involved in this project today, particularly a number of students who've been working very hard in managing these math studies are very intense. Jashan, to Naomi Fury, who's a research assistant employed on the project, and to Gersi, who's a master's student who's joined us this year on the project as well. And finally, of course, to Diabetes Research WA,